Hello, this is part 2 of our discussion on cars. Previously, we talked about depreciation and how that is really a big hurdle to overcome if you're ever trying to get wealthy. Is you do not want to spend your money on things and items, specifically cars, that depreciate. Cars are very expensive, and we don't want to spend a lot of money on something that's just going to go down in value. We'd rather spend our money on something else. Okay, so we're going to further that discussion today, okay? We're going to continue to talk about that. We're going to talk about some specific types of titles to avoid. We're going to talk about specifically about car depreciation as well, a couple tips as well. So the big thing is you need to pay cash for a car. On the last video I talked about that has to be number one is that you have an emergency fund, and then number two is you pay cash for a car. But let's say you don't have very much money, right? You got $1,500. How are you going to pay cash for a car? Well, you buy a $1,500 car. So this is a $1,500 car. This is not an amazing gold-plated lap of luxury type car. This is a car that's a little bit, not the greatest one. AC usually works. Most of the windows roll up. It's not the greatest. I mean, you can see this one. Part of this headlight is broken there. You probably need to get that repaired. All right, you don't want to be driving around a car with a broken headlight, but this is not a fantastic car, but it'll get you from point A to point B. It'll start pretty much all of the time. And like I say, the AC usually works a little bit. This is just an older car. These are usually like 20 years old. Sometimes you can get them for 15 years old. You buy that car because that's all you can afford. And what you don't want to do is get a loan. So instead you say, well, if I were going to get a loan, I'd pay $225 a month, right? $225 a month will get your car roughly around $10,000. So you say, well, do I buy a $10,000 car, or do I just I only have $1,500? Here's what you do. You take the $1,500 and you buy the $1,500 car. And then you take that $225 a month and you put it into a savings account for yourself. Okay, so you're going to be saving $225 every single month. Well, the nice thing about cars that are only worth $1,500 is they really don't depreciate. I mean, everything depreciates, I guess, to a certain point. If you have a car that runs and the AC works and the windows are rolled up, even if you can't roll them down, at least if they're rolled up, it's going to be worth $1,500. Even if that car's 25 years old, it's worth $1,500. Okay, so you're not really going to have the depreciation. So here's what you do. You take that $225 that you're saving, and in 6 months you upgrade that car. Because in 6 months, that $1,500 car is going to be worth $1,500, right? I mean, I'm assuming it's still running and the AC is still working. It's going to be worth $1,500. You haven't lost any value there. But now you have this $225 a month that you've saved. So for 6 months, it's $1,350. Okay, so now I'm going to sell that car. If I bought that car, I'm going to sell that car for $1,500. I'm going to take my $1,350 that I've been saving for the last 6 months. I'm going to put those two together, and I'm going to buy a nicer car. Okay, I sell the first car, and I purchase the second one. I'm going to add those two together. $2,850 is what I have to spend on a newer car. And there's a pretty big difference between a $1,500 car and a $2,800 car. Right, this is, I believe this is a Dodge Durango here. Much nicer car than the old one. I think the old one was a Buick, maybe. Anyway, not that Buicks are bad, but it's just a little bit nicer condition, right? It's still not the car that you want. So you're like, well, I still didn't get a really nice car. No, but you paid cash for it. And you're in the habit of saving $225 a month. So let's keep that habit going. Let's save $225 a month again. And in 6 months, you're going to upgrade yet again. That $2,800 car, maybe it's only worth $2,700. Chances are you can probably sell it for about $2,800. You've only owned it for 6 months. There is some depreciation that will happen, but for the most part, not much, okay? So you're going to sell that one. Let's just say that you sell it for the same price that you bought it for. It'll be within probably $50 of that. And you upgraded to a $4,200 car. Now you're starting to get to a lot nicer car. And realistically, for about $5,000 to $6,000, you can buy a really good quality car that will run. You don't have to worry about it. It's not going to be breaking down on a regular basis. So if you can kind of get to that sweet spot, that $5,000 to $6,000, you can get a really good quality used car. Paying cash the entire way. Okay, this is the way to do it. Just pay cash. No loans. You don't pay anyone else interest. It's just an asset that you have, okay? All right. There are a couple things you need to be aware of, though, right? A couple things called salvage titles, branded titles, rebuilt titles. I avoid those completely. It's not to say that those are bad. And if you want to buy a car and you want to own this car for a long period of time, you're like, hey, this is the car and I'm just going to drive it all the way through college. I really can't afford anything else. Great, salvage title will work. Just know that it's really hard to sell it. Okay, so that's why I don't buy them, is because it's just too hard to sell and offload. And sometimes when I want to get rid of a car, I want to get rid of a car. I don't want to have that burden of that extra work that's involved with the salvage or branded title. Well, let's just talk about what that is in the first place. Okay, you're driving your car, you've got this really nice silver car, you absolutely love it, and all of a sudden you forgot, you look down on your phone to get a text, big no-no, and when you looked up, there was a car right in front of you, and so you hit that car. Okay, so you smashed into that car. Okay, well, the car wasn't worth a lot of money to begin with. Let's say it was maybe $4,000, and you run in to someone else, and the repair bill to fix your car is more than the value of your car. In other words, if that car was worth $4,000, it's going to cost, let's say it costs $5,000 to replace it, to repair it, excuse me. The insurance company is going to say, nope, I'm not paying to repair it. It's cheaper just to pay you the $4,000 that the car was worth. And so they'll cut you a check for the $4,000 minus any deductible. We'll get into that later, but they'll cut you the check for $4,000 and you don't own the car anymore. You got to go out and buy another car. It is cheaper just to pay for the individual to replace the car than it is to fix it. That's what a salvage title is. So at one point it's been in an accident, and an accident so large that it costs more money to repair it than it does to the actual value of the car. Now, when this is a brand new Tesla, and you're talking about a $100,000 car, that is a massive accident, okay? But when you get down to an older car, maybe that's 15 years old and it's worth $3,000, it doesn't take much to get into an accident that's going to cost at least $3,000. So keep that in mind. But if you're getting this other car and you're looking at cars and you say, well, I really like this Toyota Tacoma. You know, all the other ones are selling for $15,000 and this one is selling for only $12,000. You want to ask yourself why. Okay, you want to go through this search. Has it got a salvage title? Has it got a branded title? It could have been involved in a flood. That's a salvage title. Anything weird and crazy that could have happened. Maybe it caught on fire. Those are all salvage title items, and I just avoid them. I do have friends that have purchased salvage titles with some good success there. Not to say that a salvage title is to avoid it all the time, but I do, because I'm not going to keep this car forever. I'm going to keep it until I need to sell it and I want to upgrade cars. So if I'm only going to keep a car for a year or two, it's too much of a hassle, because then you got to explain, well, here's what happened. It caught fire, but only this quarter panel caught fire. And that's why, you know, and I put a Febreze in there so it doesn't smell like smoke. I don't know. So anyway, I just avoid them altogether. But just know something crazy could have happened to this car, right? And this is these are some of the things that you can see. Is just because it's been into a major accident doesn't mean the car can't run, right? I mean, you can see that with this guy here. So, but typically I just avoid those. If you wanted to get into those, you can just understand the risks with that. Okay, there's more risk with that. Greater likelihood that something big is going to happen to it in the future. That's going to break down because something major has broken down in the past. So. Okay, and here is our graph. I get some questions sometimes. Well, my parents own a Mercedes, and so those just don't depreciate. Or they, you know, mine is a domestic. Okay, mine's a Ford. It doesn't depreciate. I got news for you. Here's your graph. They all pretty much depreciate really, really, really fast. So in the last video and before, you know, I've spoken about buying a car when it's at least 3 years old. Well, let's look at this. This is the age of our car. Here's 3, somewhere right around here. And if we go right up here, what do we find? It's roughly 50% of the value of when it was brand new. So I do not purchase cars unless they are at least 3 years old. So that way I let someone else eat half of the value of the car. I'll start at that point. Sometimes I buy them older than that, and there's nothing wrong with that. But, and that's why, right here, right? I'm going to let someone else eat this nasty little depreciation curve. Because look here, from 100, let's see, for the first 3 years, it loses roughly 50% of its value. Okay, but from years, let's say if I get a 10-year-old car, it's worth, let's call it 18%. To a 15-year-old car, let's call it 10%. I only lose 8% of value in those 5 years. Whereas the first 5 years, I lost almost 60% of its value. Yeah, no, this is a lot better. Okay, it's a 10-year-old car, so you just gotta get yourself into the mindset that I don't have to have the latest and greatest. The new cars. The old car had an 8-inch display, and the new one has an 8.5-inch display. Okay, so a half an inch. I'm gonna pay all that money for a half an inch display that's bigger. I'm okay with a little bit older display. As long as the car runs, I want the car to run. I want it to function what I need. But this is, no matter what car you go with, the depreciation on these is crazy bad. The only car that's a little bit different than this is Tesla. Tesla doesn't depreciate quite as quickly. And some of that is just because it's such a new technology. So as they get more and more cars there, you're seeing that depreciation is starting to really come down with the rest of them. I mean, Tesla right now is kind of going something like this. It's a little bit less depreciation, but as these new Model 3s come out and they're starting to mirror a little bit closer to what the rest of these are. So I love Tesla. I'm going to buy a Tesla. But I'm just waiting for those depreciation to kind of kick in a little bit more. I'm just not willing to pay full price for it. It's just not worth it right now. So, all right. Okay, should we sell our car or should we trade it in? That's the question, right? Well, let's kind of go through the advantages and disadvantages of both, and then I'll tell you what I do in my own personal life. And maybe that applies to you. Maybe you want to take a little bit different approach. Okay, if you decide to trade it in, it's less hassle. You go to the dealer, you're buying a used car, right? We don't buy used cars. But you can buy a used car. I bought used cars off dealers before. I go into the dealer, I want to buy the used car, and I need to get rid of my old one. I can trade it all in one transaction there. I don't have to worry about selling it. I just say, okay, I'm going to buy the newer car for $15,000. My other car here, they'll give me a value on it. They'll say, okay, well, that car there is worth $1,000. Okay, well, I give it to them for $1,000. I have to pay $14,000 out of pocket for the new car. It's done. When I drive off that lot, I don't have to worry about any other cars. Okay, so the dealer is going to buy it from me for $1,000, knowing that the dealer has to make money. They're not going to do something that's going to lose them money. It doesn't make sense. So they're going to have to buy it from you for $1,000. Then they're going to mark it up and sell it to someone else. And so they'll probably sell it to someone else for $2,500 or something. And so they're going to make a profit on that. And it's okay. That's not immoral. That's fine. It's good for a company to make a profit. The disadvantage of this is you just lost $1,500, because if you just were to sell it on your own for $2,500, you could pocket that extra $1,500. So if instead of trading it in, if you sold it on your own, you would gain more money. You'd earn extra money on it. The problem is you got to deal with the hassle, right? I mean, you got to list it, whether you list it through Craigslist or eBay or OfferUp or something, right? Facebook Marketplace, one of those. Someone has to come by and look at the car. They're going to ask you questions about it. You need to let them do a test drive for the car. Those are all appropriate things to do, but it's a hassle. So you've just got to ask yourself, is that hassle worth the amount of money that I'm going to gain? Okay, so for me, for my personal one, yes, I sell it on my own like 100% of the time. Maybe I've traded in one car, but it's just, to me, I don't mind that. It's not that much. I'll sell it to someone else. If I want less of a hassle, I'll just sell it for less. Instead of getting $2,500, I'll sell it for $2,000 and it'll be gone right away, right? I'll get 4 or 5 people wanting to come look at it, and you just say, okay, here it is. You have to explain, well, has it ever been in an accident? What work has been done on it? Do you get oil changes on a regular basis? You have to answer those types of questions. But that's not too big of a hassle there. Okay. One thing I will tell you to do is, if you are selling it on your own, 100% of the time I deal with cash. I do not deal with cashier's checks. I do not deal with PayPal. You get into major problems if you do that. Stay away from that at all. I deal with cash, or I have done it before where I met the person at the bank. And I was at the bank. They did their banking with Bank of America. I walked in. They said, okay, here we go. And I said, okay, I need money from you, from the Bank of America. I'll take a check, but I will not, or a cashier's check. I will not take one from the individual. Sorry, I won't do it. I've done it before where I showed up at the bank and I said, no, I just want cash. You just give me the cash. It was like $10,000. I said, I'll take the cash and I'll go deposit it in my bank. I don't want a cashier's check at all. So cash, when you're dealing with individuals, never a cashier's check. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. I had a close friend that I have that sold their car, and here's how the transaction went down. They sold their car. They were selling it for $2,500, and the person said, well, here's what I'm going to do. I've got to pay for someone to tow it. Okay, they never saw the person. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pay you $3,500, and then if you'll just give the $1,000 to the tow company when they show up. So they gave a cashier's check to my friend for $3,500. My friend goes and deposits it in her account and then pays the people the $1,000 for the towing. Well, first of all, why would someone pay you more than the car's worth? It doesn't make sense. Number two, you never deal with anyone that you can't see face to face. If they're not willing to do it face to face, I'm sorry, I just don't do it. What happened was they sent a cashier's check for $3,500, and the cashier's check was bad. In other words, they cut a cashier's check and then put a stop payment on it. So the money, while it appeared like she deposited in her account, there were no funds in this person's account. So then she withdrew $1,000 and went over and paid this company, and that company took off with her $1,000. And that's a little scheme that they're running. It's a very common scheme. So if it sounds too good to be true, don't do it. I deal with cash only, and I deal with face-to-face. If they're not willing to do that, I just don't deal with them. Okay, it's okay. Go to someone else. But I'm willing to pay you more. That's okay. It sounds too good to be true. I'll deal with someone else. So just be aware of that. Okay, just be prepared before you buy. When you're going to buy a car, number one thing is know what the car is worth. Okay, do some research beforehand. If you're looking for a Lexus, great. If you're wanting to buy a Lexus, you can know that Lexus is worth probably $15,000 before you leave. Because if you get to the car dealer and then the only Lexuses that they have, I guess Lexi would be the plural, the only Lexi that they have are $20,000, you're like, no, it's not worth it. But if you go there and like everything's like about $14,000 to $16,000, you're like, okay, I know this is what it's worth. So just know that value before you go. And then know your limits. Know that I only have $15,000. My latest car that I bought, the dealer, we had talked down and we negotiated down, and we were within $500 of what my limit was. But I just said, hey, I'm sorry, here's my limit. Here's how much I have in my account. Here's my limit. I'm paying cash. So that's really nice because it really doesn't limit you. You can't pay more than what you have in cash. And I said, here we go. If we can't get the deal done, I said, that's fine. No hard feelings. I'm going to go buy the other car. I've got another one that I've got my eye on that's 1 year older, and I can pay cash for it. So do we have this deal or not? And most of the time they'll say, okay, well, it's close. And they'll work through it and they'll get it. But know your limit and do not exceed that limit. So, okay, so this will be the completion of this. In my next video, we'll talk more about car leases, but this will at least cover the car buying process.